I wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of a soul, which is a really very important concept in most religions. This idea that that we somehow survive our bodies and live on, and maybe we go to God, or maybe we float around, maybe we're reincarnated into new bodies, that sort of thing. And you see this concept in all these religions, and I claimed it's kind of a flawed concept, and I wanted to kind of touch on some of the reasons why I think it's flawed. It's certainly a kind of comforting notion to have a notion of a soul, because you know, if one of your close relatives dies, you want to have this idea that they're still around, they're still watching you, they're still kind of present in your life, that sort of thing. It's a very, very comforting notion, especially when you lose someone close to you. But on the more sinister side, it's really sort of kind of appeals to someone's selfishness or sense of survival, survival instinct to want to live forever, right? You get to cheat death by this concept of the soul. So it's very not even at an emotional level. It's a hook. It's actually at a level of our instincts to survive. So and presumably after you've cheated death, you get some sort of eternal reward, some heaven or whatever. Depends on the religion. It's also a way to distinguish humans from animals. It's kind of a little ego stroke to say that we humans have souls. We're special. We're wonderful. And these lowly animals don't. And so we're different than they are. And it kind of allows us a justification to rationalize our killing of animals for food and things, because they don't have souls and we do. Yeah,
we have dominion over everything in the world.
Right. So there's also the strong notion that the soul is the essence of our humanity. That our soul is our humanity, in a sense, our existence. And modern science has kind of refuted that. We know that our memories and our experience, which is a large part of who we are, is contained in our brains and not in some magic thing. Our personality is certainly part of our brains. And our sense of self is something of an illusion that cognitive sciences has figured out. So if you take a look at someone who is maybe dying of Alzheimer's, or who has had brain damage, you see that they've lost some of their memories, and maybe their personality has been changed. And so this sort of begs the question of you know, if they were to die at this point in their lives, would they be an eternal child, or a sort of a broken person in heaven, or would they regain all their memories? So that's kind of a notion that's hard to kind of reconcile. You know, if a person has one sort of personality before an accident and another sort of personality afterwards, how can you know, that be reconciled with?
Knock the old soul out of him and got him a new one.
Right, right. And plus, there's this notion that you know, if embryos have souls, or young infants, you know, the population of heaven would be just loaded with very young people, because of over time we've had you know, so much infant mortality, and if all those infants are up there with souls, and they have no life experiences, and you know, even children have personalities, but it's just kind of
the whole idea of when does it become a human life? A lot of times, especially with stem cell research and all that kind of stuff right now, they're talking about, you know, as soon as an egg is fertilized, that's a potential human. That's killing it. If it then gets a soul at that point, what about soul? What about eggs that don't implant in the wall and get aborted? There are lots and lots and lots of those.
Right, and if it was an important thing, you would think that Christianity and other religions would sort of worry about that and sort of, you know, be there, I don't know, capturing them in toilets or something. I don't know what they'd be doing, but they don't seem to care about that quite as much as some other things. So there's so one of the points I made here is that you know, our notion of brain and personality and sense of self is very much at odds with this notion of some sort of essence of us living on. But that's not even the strongest argument you can make. You can make arguments about this whole moment of conception thing. But before we get into that, let me talk about this notion that this notion of when a person acquires a soul has changed a lot throughout history. And there's very little agreement across religions and very little agreement within religions. And it sort of begs the question of you know, if are they just sort of making up a story to fit the times, or do they really know, and why are they changing their minds? Is God changing His mind? It's kind of at odds with omniscience, and it's kind of at odds with the religions having some sort of special knowledge of God. So clearly there's a strong tie between being alive and having a soul, and Aristotle claimed that the fetus acquired a soul 40 days for males and 90 days after for females after presumably copulation at this point,
okay,
right?
Okay.
Because
I was going to say that's after birth. Wow.
Aristotle didn't yeah. So and then isn't that kind of ironic how there's like a different amount of time between one or the other, you know? And maybe this is an explanation for why some people think that women have a poor sense of direction. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they were lost on the way. So it's kind of laughable, but you can laugh at Aristotle because, you know, they didn't know very much at the time. But the fathers of the Christian religion, St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, confirmed this statement. They said this is right. This is right. So for, you know, 1,000 years or so of the Christian religion, that was sort of the ongoing definition.
The 49-day.
The 40-90 thing,
yeah.
Yeah. So, but different groups have had different things. More recently, there's been a notion that the soul becomes part of the child after it's born, maybe when it's baptized, or maybe a certain time after it's born. I think that someone was saying that the Jewish religion it's 30 days after birth. Mm-hmm. Christian religion in the early 20th century said that it wasn't until they were baptized, and this kind of reconciles with the fact that, you know, at these times there was a lot of infant mortality, and you'd like be really heartbroken as a mother to know that your child, you know.
Yes, if it didn't have a soul at that point and it died,
right,
it may not be quite as distressing as if it did.
Right, and so before a person has a soul, it's just like losing an animal. It's just like losing a farm animal or something. It's no big deal, and so you shouldn't worry about it so much, right? So, but
perhaps that's what they could have been trying to get to. But I still have a hard time believing that any mother would still believe anything like that and say,
right,
you know,
right. Well, there's no doubt that it's a loss. So, but this kind of cushions that loss, perhaps, and is that it wasn't really human yet.
Yeah, by having the church tell them that it's not a real loss.
Right.
It wasn't a human yet.
But today the big mantra is the soul is created at conception.
Yes.
You know, and although that's even a problem, right? Life begins at the moment of conception is the current thing. The religious right is making those comments. They're very much against abortion for this reason. And certainly the Catholics are saying much the same thing. Okay. So just to wrap up this little part, you know, we have this notion of shifting definitions that nobody seems to know, and as we learn more in science and as our times change, the definition seems to be changed to sort of fit the time, which is, you know, if I were God, I would sort of do it one way, you know, and not monkey around with that. But
well, it's mostly people, I would assume, trying to keep up with science. They have their own ideas of when a soul comes based on their limited knowledge of how this whole thing from, you know, sex to baby works. And so they're kind of just making it up as they go along. And now as we know more and more about science, they're trying to, say, get a little more specific, and that's where it ends up falling apart.
Right. And as we know even more, we find even flaws with that. So this moment of conception thing is problematic for various reasons, right? Because there's this notion of, you know, an egg cell and a sperm cell, they unite. Yeah. That happens at one moment in time. A little later on, the chromosomes merge. So, which is conception? Certainly, implantation of this new cell is very important.
Yes.
So, there's a whole process here, and this notion that a soul happens at this time is also problematic, because even after the sperm and the egg merge, there's some crazy things that can happen. You can have things called twinning, where the early embryo can split into two, and you have two different individuals, and this gives you twins. Okay, ultimately down the road, you get identical twins. So do we say identical twins have half a soul? And if one of them goes and, is blasphemous, the other will go to hell for that? Does that make sense? That doesn't make sense to me. No. So that's a problem.
Duplicated soul.
Yeah, there's another problem too, where you can have two embryos fertilized and they can merge into a single human being. And this is a very rare thing. It's called a chimera, and this can happen. And so do you have two souls in one person? And so if this person, there's a situation where a mother actually is genetically unrelated to her children because her reproductive organs were part of her twin, effectively. What would have been her identical twin had they not merged into her. Okay. Okay. And but when they do a genetic test, she's not the mother of her own children, which is kind of an interesting deal. So, wow. so let's say we have one of these people, and they go, are blasphemous, and are they going to burn in hell? And what about this other soul that's carried along? Is that going to be punished as well? The one that doesn't control the brain. Yeah. So,
and that's where a lot of the modern liberal religions come into play, is that God must have something in play to where until you're at least 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, whatever, then you're not really responsible.
Yeah.
They all go to heaven.
Right.
Despite what the Bible may say.
And baptism, I think, is a mechanism that sort of confirms that, or is a part of that.
The only problem with that is that it's only the Catholics that actually have, or it's just a couple that actually have baptism, at or near birth. For a lot of religions, not till you are able to make a choice, so you can make an informed decision that you actually want to be baptized. That's when you actually get it done.
Yeah, I'm all for baptism. At the time that you're an adult. And you can consciously make that decision rather than have it be made for you.
Exactly.
So we see, and you mentioned earlier the fact that we don't have a lot of fertilized embryos don't implant, and they're killed ultimately, and the Christian religion doesn't seem to be very concerned about these. They are much more concerned about other things. So there's really no notion of a definitive moment of conception. It's a whole process, and even then, after you have a united cell, there's some things that can go on that are very counterintuitive with this notion of a discrete soul. So I can't make sense of that. But now with human cloning, now we've got a bigger can of worms coming up, right? Yeah. Because okay, now we can take a cell out of my body, clone a completely new individual, probably won't look like me, hopefully, and does this new individual have a soul or not? Okay, and if it does, it's kind of taken God out of the soul business. That's sort of something that's very, very much an artificial, meaning man-performed action.
Man can produce one of these things, so.
Right. So does this cloned embryo have a soul? Well, if so, then God was not needed. If it doesn't have a soul, then we've created a monster or something. And we can create an infinite number of individuals from one person, because if we can take one of my cells and make an individual, we can take one of their cells and so on, all the way down. So, and I claim that one of the reasons that this cloning, this reproductive cloning especially, is so scary to the religious people is that it really challenges this notion of a soul. Not everybody agrees with me on this statement, but
I still don't see how it's that big of a problem, though. Just like artificial insemination, in vitro.
Yeah, they made many of the same arguments about in vitro fertilization, that we're taking God out of the equation.
Yeah, were they having hissy fits back then also, and that just kind of died down?
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't around when those developments were made in science, so I don't know if, maybe everybody was up in arms about that one too, saying, my God, it's unnatural.
And we certainly would say today that the people that were born from this procedure were not any different,
exactly.
any better, any worse. They certainly appear to have souls, as far as we can tell. You can make another argument based in biology.
I would argue with that statement, but
right. This common sense notion,
I
right?
don't think that we do have souls. So.
James D. Came and talked to our group a while back, and
yes.
he made an interesting point, and that is that if you say that animals don't have souls and humans do, and we descended from the animals, there must have been some sort of moment in time when humans acquired souls. So there has to be something that happened. Now, did God come down and start handing them out like little lollipops, or did He say that these two people have souls, right? And the progeny from those two people have souls. And what about intermixing? What happens if we have a mother that has a soul and a father that doesn't have a soul?
Yeah.
So that's kind of causes some problems. Also, when these first people go to heaven, they don't have their ancestors there anymore. So they're the sort of first people in heaven.
But then again, He's God. Maybe He retroactively gave souls to everyone who had already died, even.
I guess.
How far back is He going to go? But hey.
Yeah. So, and another kind of the last argument I'd like to make is you might say that, oh well, people can have their own little notions of what's going on, and you can just sort of pat them on the head and let them go on their merry way. But this notion is the concept of soul a harmless amusement? I claim not. I claim it's not a harmless amusement. I claim that it's really a very dangerous concept. Most of the inhumanity to men throughout history have been based on the idea that certain people have souls and other people don't have souls, therefore they're inferior, therefore it's okay to kill them or persecute them or whatever. So, things like the conquests and then the missionaries going out and doing their missionary work, who incidentally have killed more people than they've saved. So that's a problem. That's a problem. There's been a lot of inhumanity. There's another problem in that, if the soul is the essence of our humanity and the soul is stuck in our bodies until we die, then in a sense our bodies are living, our life is a liability, right? It's something that we should shed in order to get to heaven, right?
Yeah.
So it really has a notion of highly devaluing human life.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible thing.
And what happens also in the situation of, right now we're trying to learn how to do cryogenics, where when I die, or hopefully a little bit before I die, they can actually freeze my body and revive me, hopefully in 10, 20, 200 years or whatever. Does the soul get frozen?
Yeah.
Do I lose my soul? Do I come out of it in a soulless state? In actuality, could that be a good thing? Would I then have a split personality? Half of me is in heaven and half of me is on earth.
Yeah.
That could be kind of cool.
Right. I understand they've just been freezing heads too, because they figure that by then you'll be able to reconstruct a whole body.
Exactly. So then, do you only have 10% of a soul?
Right. Right. So I claim that belief in the soul is really a hook by which religions can pull their puppet strings and get people to do things like we've already talked about the 9/11 attack. So monetarily, we're spending a lot of tax money against this war on terrorism, and in reality, the notion of the human soul is very much a cause of this. There are other causes as well, but if people didn't believe that they had an eternal soul, then it'd be much harder to scare them up and find them to go fly planes into buildings, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, soul is an appealing concept, but I claim it's not only nonsensical, but it's very harmful. And as an atheist, I'm very concerned about this, and you won't hear any of this in your churches. That's for sure.
Yeah, and even outside of that, I mean, if you just look just to the basic premise of what we usually stand for, where's the evidence? Is there any evidence that we have a soul? I think there was one medical experiment done or something a long time ago, I can't remember the exact details, where they weighed somebody just before they died and just after they died. And they found they were like, 3.2 ounces less after they died, and therefore that's the weight of the soul.
Yeah, these out-of-body experiences are something that you hear about, and they've conducted some experiments where they've supposedly had, in emergency rooms where people are often dying
No.
They've done things like put little notes on top of the lights that where presumably they could see them in their out-of-body experiences.
If you're out of your body, you should be able to read that note.
Right.
The one that I did have, this was maybe a year ago or something. Some lady, I think they were studying her for epilepsy, I believe, and they had some electrodes in her brain to try and figure out what's going on when this all goes to hell, basically. And they found that if they had an electrode in what's called the angular gyrus in your brain, if they give it a little shock, she had an out-of-body experience every single time. And she would just, kind of, she had this feeling she leapt out of her body for a couple of seconds and then she would go back in.
Yeah.
And every single time they did it, she had one.
Right. So these out-of-body experiences are not evidence of the soul as far as I can see.
Yeah.